The Welcome to DXdao's Priorities Board monthly check-in for February 2023. It is 1700 UTC. I'm going to share the link to the doc that I created here, and then I'm going to just share my screen here. I never am happy with the way to share a screen for a presentation, because I feel like it should be like bigger. Okay. Oh, that's annoying though. How do I get this? Okay. Cool. So just kind of quick agenda of different things to discuss. So one, just like a recap of what the priorities board is, where we're at, and that. Two, initial learnings of the process. So this is the second month, and so kind of figuring out what our initial reactions, and then three, going over the results from this initial round. And so looking at the DXdao priorities boards, and then looking individually at the guild priorities board, and kind of just running through what the signal itself means. And then DXD holder and other outreach. And I kind of want to also include in that just like other improvements to either the ESP app or just the process overall, and discussing that there. So what is the priorities board? So the restructuring phase 2 proposal authorized the creation of a priorities board to gather more signal from DXdao governance and transparency on the community's priorities. We had the first meeting just a month ago, and that's when we debuted the extensible signaling primitive, or ESP app, that was built by Louis, I can't remember, which is really cool. And we kind of debuted that and went over some initial priorities of that. And then since then we had, we kind of ran through this. We have now, if you look at them, there's 19 different priorities on DXdao's one that people voted against. There are 5 different guilds that each have their own priorities. So the operations, voice, swapper, DXgov, and Carrot, you can see the different priorities, the numbers that were listed there. And so this came from an initial submission list that some of us did, and then all the guild leads, I think individually, also submitted some different priorities there. There were 15 addresses that participated. I think maybe it's 1 or 2 more, but it was hard to cross-reference the addresses. At least 15 was the most widely used, at least for the DXdao priorities board. So I think those 15 addresses, right, that represents, I think if you look at all those addresses, you can figure out where they come from. And I think almost all of them were like current contributors that are very active. So we can see who the base of this is. And I hope that we can very much expand that to not just the current contributors, but I think it's a very good base for getting signal from rep holders, from the governance participants in DXdao, and then also like a way of kind of showing maybe outside or DXD holders who are not as active in these discussions. Like once we kind of establish this, and once we kind of see different ways of how this functions, it'll be easier for them to come in and signal things themselves. So initial learnings. And so this was just kind of some initial things that I had that I was thought were kind of with the experience. So this is separate from what the actual priorities are, and kind of what the signal from that should be, and discussing that. This is more about just the actual structure and process of this. So one, there is this like number of priorities. And so right now you have, as I said, there's 19 on the main one. There's like 10 or 12 on the other guilds. So is that too much? And then if you look at some of those, they may overlap a little bit. And when you have like priorities that overlap, you're kind of siphoning off votes or allocation from one priority and putting it in another. Like if there's 2 priorities that are like very, very similar, you should be making sure that that's like a single priority in order to maximize your influence. You can see how that could get split up. So I don't know if that's something that needs to be like a way of mediating needs to be built in the process, or if that's something that just like the governance community, people will lobby behind the scenes and say, hey, I know that you voted for this one, but maybe you should switch your vote for this so we can kind of get our combined thing. I think maybe for now, I'd prefer the latter, where the consolidation is coming from people themselves that want to see their priority higher up. I think this whole like lobbying process, trying to persuade people to signal a certain way is an important part of the process. So we want people to be trying to convince people to change their votes or do something different. So that's the first thing. The second thing is more info on the priorities. So one, I think the wording of these things actually matters a lot more. And I don't know exactly if there's like a formal process for that. As I said, I think these initial ones, like the actual wording for that, I think they came either from the guild leads or from myself or from Sky. And does that need to be like the final say on those, and how would you kind of change the wording on that? Furthermore, it would be great to have some actually info and background on what those are, right? Maybe 2-3 sentences about what that priority is trying to do. So figuring out how that info is, and then figuring out, well, who would control that info, who would write that? Is that something that needs to be in like the voice of the guilds, or something there? And then I guess that's the other thing, is then the voters themselves could actually give commentary, which I think is important, because like it's a very, not rudimentary, but like crude way of gathering signal. And that can be really helpful because you put numbers on things and allows things to compare, and you're like, okay, I see it in a different way. But that doesn't necessarily capture all of the nuanced context that is needed for this type of discussion, because boiling things down to just like a number isn't always best. So I think showing as much of the context, and I think the comments is a very good idea of doing that. The third one that I was kind of playing around with was like the ongoing, whether it's an ongoing vote or like a start and end component to it. So do we need something where it's like, okay, it's going to be voting open for these days, or is something that's just going to be always running and anyone can change their priorities at any time, but there isn't like a set time for this? I think the key benefit of the last one is that for that, you don't need to have people engage and do this process every month from anew. You can basically use their default from the last month is kind of like already set in that. And then the downside, I guess, of that is of course that you've got a lot of old signal there. So maybe things have changed, but people have not updated their things as much. And I initially thought that it would be best to have the start and end as like a way of capturing it, but I'm actually leaning towards the ongoing vote. I think that's like a little bit easier system to capture that. Maybe things change if there's any type of other things besides just like signal from this. So yeah, those are like the initial learnings, I think, from the process. As I said, we're going to go over the results in just a second, but before we do that, are there any thoughts on the process here for how we kind of do either these things or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, did we know anything why there were no DXD voters?
So I think there's two. I guess one, Skies is correct that the way that these initial points were allocated, right? So I think Candy Fork got like 93 whatever like points for that, was purely based on Gnosis chain reputation amounts. And the DXD holders could be manually added and manually given points for that, but that was not an automatic done. So I guess there's a little bit in terms of like a lot of them didn't have actually any voting power for that. And then the second one is, well, why didn't they kind of engage with it? I'd be in favor of just giving that points allocation to the DXD holders that have that amount. We need to obviously agree upon some way of what exactly that amount is that translates into rep. And I think if you give that to them, then you are doing a much better job of inviting them to participate in this, rather than like just filling out this form and then doing it. But Sky, maybe you have something to speak to that.
Yeah, it was initially just Gnosis chain rep. Even when you look at wallets that would be a combination of rep and DXD, it's like a marginal difference. And then any big DXD holders, or we could enable any DXD wallet that's holding DXD on any chain to have some voting points. But if a DXD holder doesn't even want to like say that they're interested in participating, my guess is they wouldn't vote anyway. So it wasn't very hard to like say I want to vote with my DXD. Anyone could do that, and not one single DXD holder did it. So adding the ability for them to vote is, well, we now know that it's like there was not very much interest anyway. So
I mean, I think if you just look at Ross said, because I think submitting the form, you have to dox your address, right? Which I think is a pretty big deterrent.
No. You just wallets already hold DXD.
Yeah,
so
but I mean, so Sky, if there are only 5 people that submit things,
it's anonymous.
Yeah, but if the anonymity set is only 5, it's not that anonymous. So that's kind of the whole point, where you have to give it to all DXD holders in just like a pretty blanket amount, I think, to prevent.
So if we give voting points to all DXD wallets and 5 wallets vote, those are the same 5 wallets that asked, that they would express interest that they want to participate. It's all anonymous. It's just by the wallet address. So if 5 people vote, it's the same as people just saying, I would like to vote with this wallet. It's not any different, actually.
Yeah.
But we would know whether the loudest speakers are also the holders.
Yeah, I mean,
no, you wouldn't. You if there's a wallet that has DXD that wants to vote, they can vote in this.
I mean, it's got
to know who it is.
I feel like you're like literally classic like gatekeeper here, like, and I don't understand why there needs to be a gatekeeper.
So let's say
it's not gatekeeping.
2000 DXD, for instance, I have to tell you that, okay, I have this wallet, and
we already know the wallet has 2000 DXD. That's my whole point.
But you don't know whose wallet it is, right?
And I will never know whose wallet it is. That's my whole point.
Yeah, it's that's fine. But like, so for instance, if I wanted to reach out to DXD holder and say to participate, like getting them to fill out a form is just not that great. It's versus like, hey, use this app. You already have the votes there. And I guess like I really have not figured out why that would be bad to just give, like, agree on a number, 1000 DXD equals whatever 4% rep, as you said. Like, why not do that? What is the downside of doing that?
Because it's a lot of extra work for 0 people expressing interest to vote.
We will only know it if we just give it away. Yeah. There's a lot of roadblocks if we tell them that, okay,
Sky, like,
literally put one wallet in a form.
Sky, I mean, I think I've expressed to you individually, like, I would like Candy Fork's DXD to count towards this.
Then why didn't you fill the form out?
I actually don't even know where the form is.
On the forum post.
Yeah. But I mean, it seems like I
very
don't.
Simple. Anonymously fill out the form. Anyone who wants to vote using their DXD. It's very simple.
Yeah, I mean, we can move on. I don't see any reason to have a gatekeeper to this right here.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a gatekeeper. It's almost like a good extra step that if people actually care at all about voting, they simply just anonymously put a wallet address on there.
Yeah. So, okay, first time we tried by having this gatekeeper. Second time, let's try by giving votes to everybody and then see if people are interested.
Yeah, we can try that.
Yeah, and then if we get some votes, then we will see, how much of our DXD holders actually wants to participate.
Yeah. Cool. Any other like initial, because again, it's filling out a form to get someone to do something versus like, hey, vote on this right now is just like a different UI experience. And I would definitely do reach out to people if there wasn't, you have to fill out a form. Other things about this, as I said, get kind of some of these things about maybe like there's consolidation, is there overlap in these things? Do we need to have some way of mediating that? Or is that something that just kind of like naturally occurs as people react and kind of play different games to seeing the votes?
Yeah. I mean, how would we react to these signals?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting. I think for right now, it's kind of just look at the signal. I think when you're gathering signal by definition is going to be, well, not by definition, it's going to be very noisy, right? And so, like, for instance, Gallup polls, I think, are very powerful for looking at the state of public opinion in the US, precisely because they have like an 85-year track record of asking the exact same questions to a certain different, to the same group of people. So if you see like a small bump, you know that that is actually some signal that you can draw from, and that's actually something notable. Whereas if you look at like polling that are just like snapshot polling of different events, those tend to be very noisy. And like, I personally don't think those should always have such strong signal. You shouldn't take that signal as gospel. You shouldn't necessarily like abide by that. And so I think here, to answer your question, Vic, I don't think we're really at any point that we can act on this or people can do that. I think we're just still in like the gathering signal stilling phase, and making, incorporating other people, kind of figuring things out. So I think it's interesting to look at now, but I don't think it should be dictating anything for a while.
Okay.
Cool. Why don't we go ahead and look at this, and then we can kind of go from here. Let me change. I can do that. Yeah. Sky, I mean, I guess, Scott, we did that, but the only thing was not having the right.
Yeah, those wallets, the format of those wallets don't work. So we need some better way to get it. I don't know.
Yeah, we could figure that out. I can probably, because I'm assuming all of that list of wallets is probably, it's got to be deterministic in some way. Snapshot, Snapshot doesn't allow the allocation, I think, across as many things, and it wouldn't allow the ongoing component.
I think you can use weighted voting in Snapshot. It allows you to choose like, how many points do you want to give?
How do you you can put rep in Snapshot off Gnosis Chain?
I think you can create a strategy. I have never tried with multiple token weights, but it is possible, because rep is just ERC20, right? So
no, I don't think rep is ERC20. It's just a list, but I don't think it's ERC20 format. But it could work. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I think so. The big downside, I think there's two downsides. One, you can't submit new priorities, right? So there would have to be some like official list of what those are that would go into the vote. And then two, you can't do the kind of ongoing nature of this. So you would require people to basically like keep voting month after month.
I don't like this ongoing nature of it as well, because the signal constantly keeps changing. For us, fixing one feature in product development, I'm talking generally about product development. So if we have to fix a feature, it takes about 4 weeks to 6 weeks. And if the amount of changes is going to be like every day, every week, then it's difficult to take any actions out of it.
Yeah, so I think you actually might get less voting by doing the ongoing one, because people would not be changing their priorities, as opposed to if you do that before, where every month you're getting people to vote. I think you're going to narrow down the number of votes that you have, and so that you're really just getting signal from like the very, very like rabid participants if you do that. And so that's the reason I have favored the ongoing one. And I think a point I keep making to you when you're asking me is like, I think looking at how you're interpreting this is maybe like we can interpret this differently versus we want to gather the signal. And I think I would advise, again, using this as gospel in any way, because you have to establish a track record to be able to get a signal. So I know it takes like a lot to, and this is kind of, I think something to think about, like governance in general, in public governance, right? They talk about this with politicians all the time, like don't respond to the polling, right? But that doesn't mean you don't look a lot at the polling, right? It's really important to know what the polling is and how that changes, but it's a different skill set to understand the polling will gyrate and change a lot and not just react to it. And I think that's the skill set that would be better from learning here. And I think you just get less participation if you're doing like 7 votes over a 4 or 5 day period over like every month versus say, hey, you can come here and vote whenever you like. And I also think it's a little bit better, like the UI and not having these separate from proposals, and kind of signaling that there. I know that people are like preferring anything that is not homegrown and made with people that are like helping DXdao, but I think that's actually the way that things get better. We talked a lot about dog fooding here, and I think we have a good opportunity to dog food like a real product that could have some differentiation in this space.
Chris, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
The other piece of what you were saying before, where it makes a big difference whether this wording is sort of top down or bottom up, like whether the people who are voting can say what they think this thing means versus someone going in and writing out very specifically what it means. And like, if you want pure signal, then having someone come in and write exactly what these things mean, and we would have to decide who does that. But otherwise, it's an opportunity to sort of further a discussion of, we have this sort of general statement, and then different people may have different interpretations of what that is. And that furthers the conversation. It's less about getting pure signal out of this, but having a broader conversation about what these things mean and why they're prioritized. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And then Venki's question in the chat is ESP a DXdao product? I would prefer to use guilds if we have a choice. I completely agree that that's what we want as the end state, right? Is to integrate this directly into DXdao governance. But I think that means like hacking on something that we can integrate into it with a developer that like shows some interest there. But in order to do that, we need to figure out exactly kind of what the product is by dog fooding and using it, troubleshooting it, having these different like conversations about it. So I definitely think this is like the end goal for all of these things that DXdao is trying in terms of tooling, is so that it plugs in nicely to DXdao governance, which should also be the the Davi platform for any other DAO to be able to use, so we can have all of these cool DAO tools that automatically plug in.
The only difference is, I don't like using, I don't mind using any tool. The only thing is, like, if you use Snapshot, then that's like the benchmark, and then whatever tool that we build internally, we will try to reach that benchmark. If we use something like ESP, then that becomes like a baseline, and then if Davi is better, then we say that, okay, we are using a tool that is better than what we were using, right? And that's the difference that I kind of.
Well, if you want to make an omelet, you have to crack some eggs.
Yeah.
Break some eggs, I think.
I mean, everyone's saying we can do everything with Snapshot, and we can actually, people are implying we can do governance 2.0 with Snapshot, a combination of DXD and rep, and it's a simple setup. Is that true? Because if someone's saying that, can we actually do that?
No, it's not. It's not simple. I don't think Snapshot will probably pay the amount of rep same as the amount of DXD. But yeah, we've got to.
You can't combine using some algorithm, rep and DXD on all chains into some voting power.
Yeah,
Dave's saying you can. So we can do governance 2.0 on Snapshot, even though it's not on chain. Is that true, Dave?
This implies that the only thing that makes governance 2.0 is a change in voting power, and that's not the case. You could do it on in lots of different ways, right? Snapshot is just an option that has certain trade-offs. And
what I'm hearing is Dave is saying we can accomplish governance 2.0 without, it just won't be on chain, it will be on Snapshot. Is that true?
I mean,
could we have done that a year ago?
What I'm saying is, on Snapchat, there are like, you can build a custom voting module, which is like how voting power is calculated, right? So, I mean, anyone can set up a snapshot, and then they're called like strategies. So like the most basic one is just ERC20 balance of, but then you can do like a whitelist, you can do multi-chain, you can do like NFT balance, you can do with multipliers, you can do only a minimum balance, you can do a threshold, weighted, like, and you can code coding a strategy is very simple. You just have to define how voting power is
Cool.
weighed up.
So that you're basically saying we can already do governance 2.0, just would be on Snapshot, right?
I mean, we can define a formula between rep and DXD, and you could do that on Snapshot today. Yeah.
Yeah, but governance 2.0, I mean, a couple of things. So one, governance 2.0 gives them time multiplier effect to DXD staked, which I think is like a massive thing when we think about DXD holder snapshots now. Like that's the big reason why I don't think like token holder votes work is if you have no kind of time multiplier. I think two, the biggest thing, snapshot is not on chain, right? There's no even like you sign with your wallet, but there's no even like on chain element to it at all. It's clearly taking like, take the snapshot as opposed to ESP, which is building on Gnosis chain. You can kind of get that there. So, I mean, I'm happy to do things on snapshot individually for votes. I just don't think there's any evidence that it is somehow like a beneficial platform long-term for DXdao, given the decentralization concerns, or some way to actually integrate into Davi products here. And I actually think there's a lot of opportunity here with ESP, but
how would I put it now? I'm trying to collect my words here. I mean, we need to work a lot on ESP if we have to make it like ongoing votes. I mean, when would you take the snapshot on how much DXD that I have today, and then I voted, and then what happens tomorrow? I sell my DXD.
yeah.
Right? So there is like a lot of things that ESP has to upgrade itself. So that's why I was suggesting that maybe we should just use snapshot and then accustom our DXD holders to a tool that everybody is using. And snapshot is really good in their UX as well. And it is also a lesson for our Davi to actually see how close that we could be to snapshot in terms of voting. So that's the only thing.
Yeah, and I want to move on to the actual results of this because this is like I think an important thing that we're kind of figuring out for here because I think there's a lot of signal in this. I don't think this is a proposal, right? In the way to think about this, I think that's kind of like the wrong framing. I think what we're trying to do here is more expand the different signaling options that you get. And like having a difference between that. I know people do like temp checks and everything like that. But again, I think this is like an idea when you think of polling and signaling that it's just like an untapped area. And I don't think Snapshot is good at polling really at all. And I think you see that they do that. Two is, I can't remember what I was going to say with that. I see that. I guess two, Venki, I also don't think at all it makes any sense to, because Snapshot I don't think is like in any long-term way could fill this role. And so like at some point you're going to have to move everyone over. And I think this is kind of, again, going back to the whole dog food process, things do not have to be figured out at first. And you should be okay with having confusion about how these things work together. And that's why I keep saying we don't need to be making sure that this has like this signal that we need to like worship as gospel right now. It's more about figuring out these kinks now. And I'd rather do that through something where we have some ability to do that. And then I think lastly, there's no, maybe this is wrong for Snapshot. I don't think is there ability to allocate different amounts of votes, or is it simply you could do like a ranked choice voting for that? I think it's probably just ranked choice.
You can do weighted voting.
Right, but that's not it. It's basically like you have the ability to vote. Like,
so if I have 100 DXD, I could say like, okay, this one gets 30 and this one gets 20.
You can't do that.
Yeah, because I have, I think I have voted for some of the fee governance before in one of the other dexes where you could basically choose how much of my voting power I could spread across different LPs.
Cool. So let's head over and kind of look at these signals and this is great. We could kind of signal this as part of that. So I just wanted to like maybe talk about some of the results. As I said, there were 15 people that are 15 entities that contributed there, and I think telling. I think I was talking to someone. It's basically like they're not necessarily surprising, but maybe they unearth some unspoken kind of things about how what people kind of feel in different priorities there that are out there. I think it's very good to have that out in the open so we can kind of like work from that. So I think here, just for you can see the since this is Candy Forks account, you can see the actual allocation for these here. This is from Candy Forks, but you can see the different ones for the overall here. Yeah, and looking at these, I think you see a couple things. One, there seems to be some agreement on this flagship product vision and mission there from a couple different addresses here. And then I think you're looking at like the big four, I don't know, kind of initiatives or products, I guess, that DXdao is building, thinking that both DXGov kind of has two different ones here. So governance 2.0, we're just talking about that. Swapper, Davi, and Carrot. And I think kind of just looking at some of the numbers here, they're all relatively, I don't know, close to each other, and I think kind of have a strong signal here for like what are the top 5 priorities for DXdao here, right? We have developing this flagship product vision and mission, and then like these are the big 4 almost like product technical challenges I think that we're focusing on there. And then you get into like the bottom 5 here. There's another wave of different types of things that are implemented here, but not as there seems to be some coalescing around these different things. I think it's interesting to see how people also spent their signals here. So you can see kind of the different amounts. And again, these are based on the amount of rep only here. And so I think you can see different people have different strategies. I think Sky was similar to Candy Fork in kind of spreading it around across several different priorities. I think you're looking at like kind of Ross and Ross kind of focus on Davi, I think, which is a very good thing. Anyone that should be on their product should be very much like kind of focused on that. Just an example. Yeah. And then we have kind of another spread out here. Maybe let's look at, and then Venki, I think, as again, should be kind of focused on Swapper. That's what he thinks kind of the DAO's priorities there. So he's got it clearly voting for those. And then, yeah, you can see, as I said, I kind of spread things out a little in terms of the focus. I still think the governance 2.0 is the top priority of the DAO. We can do a lot of other things there. And then, yeah, Zurich's Klong, Keenan, spreading it around a little bit as well, but clearly kind of focused on some areas here that are near and dear to his heart. And then, yeah, Medusha, nice spreading it around, I think, to some key ones, not just on the governance elements there is good. And then, yeah, I don't know if there's any thoughts or kind of reactions to maybe the signals here, whether that seems like right or seems a little different. Was there anything surprising? As I said, it kind of seems right. I kind of liked how the products kind of formed here. I think that's also true of Voices 1, 2. So why don't we look at that next? So Voice, I think there were 13, 14 signalers here. And I think here, this is where you kind of, I think Voice is like is definitely like the guild, of course, not being a product guild. Like a lot of its priorities are spread across serving the different product guilds. And so I think seeing how the rest of DXdao wants those resources to be allocated, I think is a strong signal. Whereas most of the other guilds are much more like focused on like completing a very specified task already. So maybe I think Voice is actually probably the most amenable to different signal here. But here you also see the existence, right, of the 3 different products here, right? Carrot, DXGov, and Swapper. Kind of interesting, I think, that Carrot is the top priority here, which is a little bit different than what you'd see on DXdao as a whole. But I would guess, maybe putting some words into the voters at the top here, I also voted for it. It seems like Carrot is kind of ready for a prime time launch in a way, and that could attract some marketing resources there, specifically like around the launch itself. Since there's been a lot of work in the past, and so gearing up for this one right here. Yeah, and so maybe that's like of the 3 products, that's the one that's probably going to get the most attention now because it's gearing up for the launch here, at least according kind of to the priorities board and the way some people voted. And then here you see the flagship product suite that was from the overall DXdao board as implemented by the Voice Guild here is kind of leading that effort there. There's been a couple posts a post in the forum and some good discussion on that. And so that is clearly a big priority of the Voice Guild now, and be interested to see how like the flagship product suite of that comes out there. And then DXgov branding and go-to-market strategy. I think that involves some of the stuff that we just saw today in the version V3 release. There was some nice new I think coat of paint on that, and things look good there. And so maybe looking at DXgov, it's kind of going through another product iteration cycle, and so kind of inching towards that like wider push, but still probably needs to figure out a lot of key things, maybe namely like what is the name for that, but is a big priority, I think, like overall there. And then, we've got Swapper kind of right behind there at 75 there. So kind of the same thing there when the 3 products kind of there, seeing where some of the votes for those go. And then, so those, I think the top 4 are like pretty strong. And then you kind of have like a tie for 5th here with developing key partnerships here, a nice split vote. And then continuously presenting DXdao's mission and vision to Web3 communities, like one of those kind of like ongoing priorities that are implemented there. And then, maybe a good example of something that I don't know if I would change, but like the Swapper expeditions and go-to-market strategy, like, I kind of see, and I think I voted, so Candy Fork voted for this with 15. And that to me was kind of thinking just Swapper in general, but now it seems that this like Swapper marketing partnerships and growth post is a little bit more gathering. And I guess maybe that's the shelling point that people are gathering around. So I would probably consider whether I should consolidate that to express the opinions more directly. But just an example of some of the issue or the discussion point from earlier. So any kind of thoughts on this one? You can see a couple different ones at the bottom here, like community outreach, something that's always there, operation decentralization, maybe a little bit on the back burner. I think this is a good example of like, even though it's maybe a cool idea, it's not necessarily like a priority right now. It should not be getting the resources of that. But thoughts, comments? Anyone want to give further context to their vote?
I mean, I'm the one that created this lead Swapper marketing partnerships and growth, and probably I was one of the last to vote as well. So that was the reason. I just wanted to bring up this flagship product suite document. What does the timeline look like if we work on this product suite document?
I think maybe Keenan could answer that. I'm not sure if you can chat now, but 1 to 2 weeks, there you go. And I think this is a good example of like, maybe you can, it's easier to ask that question of Keenan and of the Voice Squad when you're like, you can point to this as like, clearly there's some signal that people kind of are wanting this. And I think it's a good way of opening that discussion.
And if this product suite document comes out, do you think we will have enough right developers to work on this product, or is this the direction that DXdao will go towards?
I mean, I'd like to see the kind of products you document in general before commenting on it, but I think it's not. I think it's more like a way of tying things together that already exist and maybe laying out a path to move towards in the future. Not so much like, I don't think it's at all like a new product or be new team. Other thoughts on the Voice board? Cool. And then just looking at operations here, again, maybe looking at an interesting one is thinking about treasury deployment, as that's seems to be something signaled, and why. And so you can see, yeah, we got a lot of interest from doing that. I think the conversation around the treasury manager that's been ongoing in governance the last couple of weeks is kind of a perfect way of addressing this. But clearly, I think that's something that's an opportunity from a lot of different people, and could also show how you can signal something very strongly with just by devoting a lot of your points to that. And then enact restructuring refocus proposal. This is, I think, is also kind of been a key focus of operations squad, and this kind of proposal, I mean, this call itself, and kind of filling that out. And I think, pretty wide voting on that. And then, yeah, so those are kind of clearly the first two priorities that for operations squad, I think are all guild and are also kind of taking up most of the time and focus right now. And then below, the governance and developer public calls, I think those remain like a core way of engaging with the community, the developer call before this, and then also the governance call there, but as a kind of medium priority there. Augusta thinks they're very important. And then execute on the new token model. This is, again, something I think has been taking up a lot of operations guild time over the last couple of weeks here, and is clearly, one of the priorities there. So, those are kind of, I think, the clear 4 ones there. And then, the 5th and 6th ones here are a little bit less of a priority, but still kind of important and clearly kind of some feedback there. And I think things like this but in improved contributor feedback process, right? I think is a good example of Venki. Like, I know you had brought this up in some of the chats, and being able to signal that in a formal way through governance and not just through a chat, I think is like really cool. And then you could try to maybe get other people to vote on this as a way of moving this priority up the board. So I think that's a cool way, and it's good to see that signal here. And I think there were, I'm trying to think of any others that were interesting that caught my eye. Well, here you go. Furthering DXdao ESP. I think that's a new one I didn't see. I'm not sure what DXdao's multi-token design is, but interesting. And then
how that's just like how the current DXdao related tokens and new potential DXdao tokens would all relate to each other, and drive value between them, and like, should more products have tokens or not have tokens, and how it all relates to DXD, basically. But it's basically, you have to research that because it's a complex thing. But we could also have more practical, just swapper token, which we have, like driving revenue to that token, and then that token feeding back to DXD token. Like, just a simple real life example of that is possible today without getting deeper into like more tokens. Yeah.
Cool. Any other thoughts on this one? On operations guild priorities board? Cool. And then, as I said, I think the more the signal is, I think, on those 3, because they're obviously the overall one is a great way of seeing where the community's interest is as broadly. But I think operations and voice, because they service a lot the other product guilds, a lot of times they have to make the decision in terms of allocating time and resources there. So that was probably the strongest one. But to go over, but I think it's still a good signal kind of to see this there. So looking at swapper one here, I think you can see front end maintenance and bug fixes. I think this is more kind of going after and making sure that the front end kind of is a really awesome place, decentralized and private place to trade. Ooh, wow, look at that, real time. Someone just, I can't remember how much, but you can voted in that. So zapping contracts, and you can see here some nice strong support from Ross and Medusha from dev side. And then delivering and I think these are kind of clearly too, it's really cool actually hear the zapping contracts update on the developer call here, and it sounds like that is ready for internal or DXdao review by some other developers before going to an audit. And I was just looking that was part of, there was a contingency cost for that in the 1H 2023 budget. So it's kind of cool that those are the things there. And look at that, zapping contracts is now moved up into one with another vote there. I got to see who, maybe that was. Delivering revenue to swapper token. So I think this is something we've chatted about here. Kind of see nice, strong support from a very wide base of individuals here. Eco router improvement. I think the eco router is definitely, this is something Katie Fork Signal, I think, is it's one of its strongest thing. I think eco router is definitely one of the coolest things about Swapper. And I think making sure that is kind of competitive and is operating, it's just an easy tool to use. I think is very important here. And then some other support from others. Swapper expeditions and user acquisition. I think, this is an example of a priority that I guess still depends a little bit on not an external entity, but I know that, I guess, no, sorry, that was Arbitrum Odyssey, but trying to make sure that priority lines up with that can be difficult, even if it's something that DXdao itself prioritizes. And then, we can see liquidity.eth. I know this has been an interest of several. And so you can see here, I guess that's the fifth, or sixth priority there here. So starting to get kind of some signal here in terms of zapping contracts, front-end maintenance, delivering revenue, eco router improvement, swapper extraditions are kind of the other things that are important. And then, I think MEV capturing aim and research. This is something Katie Fork and looks like Sky voted on. I think is a cool opportunity maybe to work with CalSwap on this and maybe look at some of the possibilities on the swapper backend in general. Splitting swap from swapper. I know this was a conversation about basically kind of almost expanding swapper by peeling off a core function from it, so you can add more bells and whistles to other things, but keep that as a very, very base one. Network expansion, I think, is speaks for itself. I think it's kind of interesting that maybe not everyone is voting for that. That seems to be something that a lot of times it's okay, we need to be expanding more networks. But I think partly because swapper, the front end, for instance, is on too many networks there. And I also think, there's maybe a diminishing return to deploying on new networks and trying to attract revenue. And then, Uniswap v3 research. Some people, looks like Sky here, voted for that. That's a good example of maybe that one could gather more signal if it was combined with the MEV capturing AMM research into a general backend research. That something like that would be a way of maybe moving that priority up the list there. And then this looks like it's a new DCA stacker. I think was not on there when I was doing that, but that's kind of the new tool that Adam has been building around that. Kind of works through CalSwap to do dollar cost averaging. Cool. Any thoughts on the swapper board? It may change as we speak. Cool. Then DXGov here. I think this is looking at the top priority. Again, this one aligns with DXdao because I think that was governance 2.0 was the second priority here. And maybe this is a little bit more specific on what that one is. And I actually think this is a very good example of a priority that's written very clearly, or you kind of understand it, right? Contracts plus Davi support. It's kind of a very clear one of that. This is something I think a lot of different people voted for in high amounts there. We can see Venki and Katie Fork as well, kind of voting for that, but also from the DXGov team. And then there's Davi expansion to more governance systems. So this is not just through guilds, but looking at other ones. I think this is kind of interesting to see. This is a priority by many in DXGov itself. I think those are the top three votes here, and then Sky there. So that's an interesting one there. DAO setup wizard. I think this is AKA factory, being able to do establish a DAO really quickly through the platform. I think that's a key feature to be able to have, especially when you're looking at like deploying on low cost chains like Gnosis Chain and Polygon. I know there was a question about that from Nylon in some of the chats earlier, and that would be a very cool thing to do. And I also think that's something, yeah, you can see here a pretty wide vote with Augusto, Sky, Keenan, and others. Davi social UX. I think this was, more of, I talked to Ross before this. I know Minutia's on the call if he wants to add anything about this, but yeah, that's another key thing to be looking at. I think same thing on-chain accessibility UX. I think this is like looking at like what are the on-chain actual actions of that. And then, yeah, you can see here maybe to signal some of the priorities that I thought were important or Candy Fork voted for here. So I guess this is, so those are the top 5 there, but at 52, something that maybe is not that sexy, but I think incredibly important to the way like DXdao functioning and is an incredibly important role for DXGov is keeping DXVote and Alchemy and the security bot like up and running, because that's, I think very important. I think that's why you see some voting from Sky and myself in terms of that, because we're frequent users of that governance. And then, the rest at the bottom are more, again, you can see some things that Candy Fork voted for that did not make it to the top here. But the Davi internal is, again, more about thinking about how we can devote resources to helping DXdao governance and be using this. And I think some of the same thing for DX vesting system for contributors. Is there a way we can get some of DXGov's resources and time focused on solving some of DXDAO's existing issues, not just for other DAOs there. And then, I think this seems more like a deliverable, having Davi ready for permissionless public by the end of Q1. But a strong signal from Sky there. And any thoughts on DXGovs? Cool.
I just wanted to say that since we don't have detailed comments about each of these signals, it was really difficult for me to vote for DXGov. So I just voted like whatever that I understood. I think I voted only like 2 or 3 signal items.
And I think that's good because we kind of we know that like, okay, we need to think about how to improve that. But then also like I think it's important that the guilds and governance themselves are able to communicate the ongoings of priorities in an effective way to governance and rep holders and DXD holders themselves. So that should be something that both sides we need to figure out how to do better. And I think it makes sense to vote on anything you want or anything you feel based upon your current information, and then that signal, right, of, well, this is clearly the only things people understand, that means there's some heavy lifting to be done by the guilds, guild leads, governance in terms of like explaining why these other things are important and need a priority and need kind of resources. But that persuasion is, I think, part of the process. Cool. Sky, you look like you were.
That was someone had raised that point early on, that like these simple titles are not super clear. There's another signaling app where like there's a link out, so you could like for each one of these there's a link out to what looks almost like an EIP or something, like the details of that formal signal proposal or whatever. And the way we were solving it initially was anyone who wants to participate or is participating, if you didn't know what one of these things was, you can just ask in any of the Telegram channels and people will answer it. So having a like dialogue about the signals as you're voting on them is actually probably like a really beneficial thing in general. I mean, it takes a little more time, but it would be cool if people were talking about all the different signals and trying to get other people to put more votes toward those signals. Like you were saying in the beginning, like a dynamic, it's very dynamic. Like, and like, oh, I see everyone voted for, Davi's social UX. I don't really know what that means. The social part is less interesting to me. I could even reach out to the people that voted for it and say, like, why do you think this is so important? Because I don't think it's that important. And they either convince me or I convince them, and then you can actually change your allocation. So like, that's pretty cool if a community was actively doing that. That was also one. I thought there'd be some DXD holders who would have some interest to, I know we could have made it easier for them, but if they actually wanted to vote, they could have easily voted, and they could have actually talked about some of these things as well. And we could even have a channel in Discord where it's for discussing the live priorities board of the community. I think eventually every community will probably have something like that. Like, I don't see why a community wouldn't want to have that, a live discussion of the priorities of your community, right?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, the discussion is almost like the point, right?
And that's a good. I guess that answers my own question. If this tool or this experience was embedded in Davi, which is like, we did have some voting tool in Alchemy, which didn't work that well. If you could, in the discussion down below the actual tool using Orbis or whatever you were using, that's where the discussion was happening around each of the boards. That would be amazing, but like, doesn't exist yet right now. So we're going to have to like work around it. We're going to use this, and then we're going to use Keybase, and we're going to like work around for what we have right now. But eventually I agree. It'd be amazing if this was all embedded in Davi.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing about Orbis and Ceramic. That's like a perfect commenting to get comments on these things, but have that be from the same addresses. Cool. I know we're running up on the hour here, so I don't want to take too much more time here. But yeah, you can kind of see this is Carrot 1, which maybe again is like the least controversial. I think partially because it's kind of the balls or no, the wheels are in motion there, and a lot of like exciting things there. So you can kind of see, yeah, the key one. Here, release V1 front end and contracts, and we saw we've seen some updates on both of those recently here. And then, yeah, I think what goes in conjunction with that is figuring out the go-to-market strategy, which I think if we look at the budget that was passed in December, that actually the ownership of that goes under the Voice Guild. But I do think that's something that you still want to have some of the Carrot Guild participating in and feedback with all of that. So I think it's like a good thing to have as like a top priority. And then, yeah, kind of the other one there, internal texting fixes and improvements there are always kind of important. That those are really the three ones there, and then some other priorities I think that Venki had submitted here. But kind of to his point earlier, the only ones I kind of felt comfortable voting on that I was like, well, these are good priorities were these two. But I still think that's like that's a good signal, and maybe I need to learn more about these, or I can figure out whether these will be important in the past. But yeah, getting some context on those would be helpful. Cool. Any thoughts on Carrot or anything else with the existing boards here? Actually, that was the end of that one here. I have another. Cool. Yeah, I think we talked about the DXD holder and other outreach already. I think this is another opportunity also to engage a wider swath of rep holders, not just current contributors. And I think trying to figure out how to get voter participation is very, very important. But you have to, I was going to say you have to lead the horse to the trough, but they have to drink it themselves. But we do need to do a lot of leading the horse to the trough for when it comes not just DXD holders, but I think other rep holders, just trying to like LARP our way into more active governance. And I think having this information out there, figuring these things out, and getting wider participated is it's like an ongoing battle and discussion there. Denki, did you want to?
Yes. I mean, I don't know if we can offer any feature improvements, but then it would be super nice if I'm on one of, like, let's say for instance for voice, and then I could just choose numbers for different signals and then vote once. it was too cumbersome. Just add votes, and then I have to rethink, and then I change the number, and then I have to vote again, and then it just takes a lot of time.
Yeah, it is a lot of voting, right?
Yeah.
Because it's 6 boards, and that's kind of it's hard to get. If we want to have all of those, I think it makes sense to have the guilds be like have their own board. I think what we talked about before, we were like saying they probably only needed to have like 3, maybe they only have 3 priorities that actually have signal. And yeah, I think it's, you know, maybe people only vote on the DXdao priorities board, but that's fine too. That's a start there. And then I think just like the kind of to your point, should there be some like alignment between the priorities across the boards? So there was like the governance 2.0 priority on the DXdao board, but does that line up? I guess when you look at the DXGov board, it was actually governance 2.0, which was like more specific. It had contracts and Davi support. So should that be like consolidated into one, and you could kind of see how that priority is expressed at the DAO level or is expressed at the guild level? I think, yeah, an opportunity there. It'd also be great to see what a voter voted on across all of the boards, right? So I think now, if you look at it, you can see what, yeah, Diogo did on this one, but it would kind of be good to see what he had done on all of the other ones.
It would also be good, I don't know how controversial it is, but it would also be good to say that, okay, we are deploying 1 million this year. How should the budget be utilized?
Yeah, I mean, that's why, like, in general, this is something really I think we should focus on, kind of returning our other conversation, because it's just signaling and polling, which DXdao just does not really do that well. You know, basically just because if you look at on-chain proposals, they can only be yes or no votes, right? And that just comes baked into DAO stack architecture. And so if you have that, and you have this kind of very informal process of getting to a soft consensus for a proposal that can only go to a yes or no vote. And, you know, we sometimes use polls through DAO Talk that we can have, but I think having like another way of using that to form that soft consensus is really cool. And like just be a way of a more expressive way of governing. And so I think, yeah, it's not just for the priorities board, but for lots of different decisions, getting like a signal is important. And that's, again, why I like it separate from using it like a proposal format, right? Which kind of signals a certain which is a different type of signal, but having like a more fluid way of getting that signal for the soft consensus before going to the proposal phase. Okay, we are over the hour, and I think I probably talked for 50 minutes of this. So, but I had a 3-day weekend, so kind of a little bit relaxed. Cool. Yeah, so I'll write up some items here. Sky, maybe we can chat about, I don't know if there's like another update, or kind of we'll update like the main balance, but I think we can kind of chat a little bit about like how to consolidate some of these things. And maybe, again, that's in the background between others. I'm actually probably going to change some of the priorities that we discussed that were voted on before, based on this discussion, and seeing kind of how some of the priorities have attracted different others. And so, yeah, I think that'll be a takeaway. And I invite anyone to also reallocate if they think some things make more sense as priorities there. And yeah, and I'm curious, we'll see about, we can kind of read more about the snapshot option going forward. But I think for now, it makes sense to kind of keep using this and iterating on this. And ESP. Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining, and sorry for being a little over here. And yeah, have a happy Tuesday. See everyone tomorrow on the governance discussion.
Ciao.